Welcome to Quilting's first reality show, live and unscripted with Susan Smith.
Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Susan Smith in my studio, Stitched by Susan, and you are in an episode of Live and Unscripted, where I show or stream in real time a whole project. Often it is quilting at my long arm machine, but today I am finishing up a pillow that I quilted several weeks back in an episode, and we're going to get that pillow to the finish line today, ready to take a nap on. So, this is a little bit new for us, Mr. Producer, my husband and I. We don't very often do projects at the sewing machine and ironing surface, so we had to mess around with lights and setup today. So hopefully we've got things running smoothly. I've got my coffee in hand, so the morning is off to a great start. So before we dive in, a quick thank you to a few people, to Mr. Producer, Dave, my husband, there he is. Oh, look, and you can see the long arm a little bit. What you can't see is the tangle of wires. Oh my goodness, it was a process getting all these lights and things in place. Good times. I'm glad I have him to help me. Also, our son Will, who does the introductory voices. Today, I think, was a James Bond-ish one. So thanks, Will, for that. And then lastly, our good friend Dan Unger, who graciously gives us his guitar music to play throughout the episode. So that's what you'll be hearing, very gentle, very soothing, and very beautiful music that Dan makes and allows us to use. So thanks, Dan, for that. Okay. Today's project is a pillow. I should mention a couple more things before we dive in, though, again. One of them is YouTube channels, of course, are free for you to watch. But if you are interested in supporting my channel, there's a very easy way to do it. You can just go to buymeacoffee.com/Stitched by Susan. There, for as little as $5, you can make a one-time donation or commit to a monthly one if you so choose. And all of the funds that come in through that is what provides our lighting, cameras, cables, routers, all the things. So thank you all for your generosity. This last month, a number of people have chipped in, and it's really been a help. We had to get a new GoPro, which is my close-up that's usually at the long arm. So just some new equipment that we had to upgrade. And so we really appreciate your support there. It helps us to try to keep getting better and better as the months go by. Okay. Mr. Producer, he's writing notes for me, bless his heart. One more thing I wanted to say before we get into the sewing is that if you're interested in some easy listening while you're quilting, I also have a podcast, and it's called Measure Twice, Cut Once, and Other Life Lessons Learned from Quilters. You can find that easily at podcast.stitchedbysusan.com, and you can choose how you want to listen to it from there, Apple or podcast apps, whatever you like from there. So some easy listening there. Most of those episodes are interviews with other quilters. So talking about sometimes their businesses or their life story or what quilting has meant to them. A few of you who are here in the audience today have actually been on. Amy Fryan is one. Adria Good is another. So a lot of those episodes are just conversations with other quilters. And so you might really enjoy them. Okay, I'm going to put my coffee aside and get it out of the way. I'm working today on a Bernina 770, and it is the Quilter's Edition. So this machine, honestly, is fairly new to me. So, maybe you guys want to school me as we go along if there are features I'm not using that I could be, because I know it is devised for quilters. I do a lot more quilting than I do piecing, and so I have not learned the sewing machine as quickly as maybe I ought. But that's what I'm sewing on today. And certainly it is a beautiful, smooth Cadillac of a machine, and I know it's going to be a great help in putting this binding on. So today we're working on a pillow. So a few weeks back I quilted this block, and the block itself is from the Lori Holt Vintage Christmas books, and it's just one block from an entire quilt that had these cars and trees in it. So that episode, and it was a few weeks back, and it was called Straight Line Quilting with a Twist. And it was an episode where I was having, some tension troubles at the long arm, so you got to see some troubleshooting in action. But this did get quilted. And then I've got a pillow form that I'm making my pillow to fit. So I'm going to do an envelope style backing, and I'm going to bind the whole thing for the finishing touch, and then that'll be my pillow ready for use. So let's move this form out of the way. There we go. And we'll get started. The binding that I'm going to put on today, the day that I did quilting, I showed a couple of options for binding fabrics, kind of an A, a B, and a C, or maybe it was 1, 2, 3, and had you all vote on them. And so everyone agreed that this dark was a great choice of binding to trim this block. But a few people chimed in, why don't you do a piping in one of the pink colors? So I did what's called a faux, I guess faux piping, because there's no actual cording in it. So I'll open it up just so you can see it. All I've done is made my binding in 2 pieces. Boy, that black is hard to see against me. There you go. There we go. And I cut the pink part that I wanted to show on the fold a little wider. So for my purposes, I cut the black, the dark, at 1 3/8 width, and the pink at 1 5/8. So when I sewed them together, there's a 1/4 inch seam on the back, pressed toward the dark. And then when I press it in half, what happens is a little bit of that pink, about 1/8 of an inch, shows in that fold. So it's just kind of a faux piping. So when I sew the binding on, I'm going to top stitch just in that little ditch of piping, and it's going to look like a corded, beaded, not beaded, but a corded edge, and it's just going to be a little finishing touch. So let's get started. A couple things I've done to prep. This is my backing of the pillow, the back side of the pillow. It's an Allison glass print, as is the prints in the car. And I've made them, you know, I'm a bit of a sew by the seat of my pants sort of gal. So I cut with the fabric the same width as my pillow. Can you see it? The same width as my pillow. And it's quite a bit longer, and I have 2 pieces. So what we're going to do is hem them so that they will overlap in the middle, envelope style. We're going to get them both right side up. So I'm going to press those now, and we're going to sew them, and then we'll overlap them in the way that we think is best for filling up that whole pillow, and then we'll probably end up trimming the edges because it's quite long. As I said, I just cut the width of fabric and just cut it in half. That's all I've done so far. So let's go ahead and press a seam into them. I like to do a wider hem. You know, you certainly could do just a 1/4 inch, for example, but I like a wider hem. I think it tends to lay flatter. So I'm pressing in about 1 inch and then doing that again. So I've got a double fold hem. I want it to be, wasn't fully heated up. It had turned off. But in a moment, you'll see the awesome steam that it produces when it's had a chance to warm up. So let's make sure that this fabric, can you see, has little houses on it. So I want to make sure that they're both right side up. And I'm pressing the selvage edge. It doesn't really matter if you use the selvage edge or not. This one lays nice and flat, so I'm just going to leave it in there. I'm not bothering to trim it. It's just getting turned into that hem. Sometimes selvages, you know, pull up a little bit, and in that case I would have trimmed it off. Let me just check my iron here again. There we go. I pushed the button again. Okay, so now we've got, can you see this little double fold that's about 1 inch wide? I didn't measure. That would be too hard. So now I'm going to take my pillow, and maybe if I lay it this way, you can see better. Right sides together, I'm going to lay this on here. Let me think this through. You can see how it's going to go, right? There's going to be that envelope style overlap, but I'm actually going to go and sew these hems in first, and then we're going to measure again and trim up our back to fit our pillow at that point. So let's quickly sew these hems. As always, feel free to be typing in questions as we go. You know, I'm not as expert at sewing like this as I am about quilting, so I'll do my best to answer them, but that's all I can promise. And I'm just doing a straight stitch very near the edge of that hem. That's one. I feel like binding a pillow is the very simplest way to finish it. You certainly can, you know, sew it right sides together and then turn it. But the seams tend to get bulky, especially when you've quilted the front as I have. So this process will allow us to just keep the wrong sides of the pillow together and just bind all those raw edges and finish them in that way. I like to give those seams, those hems, a good press so they lay really nice and flat. Whew, there, now we've got some steam. It's like a sauna in here. Okay, so now we've got our pillow block. There's one more thing I'm going to show you. Way back when, 100 years or so ago, I had a series of Singer hardcover books on sewing different things, and one of them was home decor. And it had a lot of pillows in it and a lot of different styles. But one of the tips in it I found so helpful, and that is that you take, I'm not sure how well this will show for you, but this corner was a 90-degree corner. And I took about 1/8 of an inch off and angled it out about 2 inches over. And I did that on both sides, just slightly softening this corner. And it makes if you do it exactly 90 and then you bind it, it almost pulls outwards. So this, when it's finished, looks like a more crisp 90-degree. It doesn't interfere with turning the mitered corners of the binding. I like the way that corner looks when you just soften that edge a little. So on both sides, I just cut in about 1/8 of an inch and angled it out, cut down about 1/8 of an inch and angled it up, just to soften those corners. And I did it on all four. So on my backing, I will do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to not worry about, at this point, the end of it that's extending. I'm only going to worry about where I want this envelope overlap to be placed. And I'm overlapping it about 3 inches. And certainly there are more ways you could do this. You could match up those hems one on top of the other. You could Velcro them. You could button. You could snap. There's any number of ways you could do it. I'm going the easy route, and I'm just overlapping a little further in that envelope style. And there will be no fastening at all. So now I'm just smoothing that out to the edge of my quilt block, and I'm going to pin it in place. And I think the easiest way to do this is honestly going to be to sew it or baste it together from the pillow side, and then everything is firmly in place, and trim it at that point. Because I see that it's even a little bit wider this way than my quilted edges, so I will get that all trimmed up afterwards. I will make my seams, though, exactly match the pillow size. So let's put a few more pins just to hold everything nice and smooth so nothing shifts as we're basting it. Ooh, that's a really short pin. That's a dud. I do not like short pins. I might be erring on the side of lots of pins, but I don't want it to shift. It takes less time to put a few pins in than it does to redo it, right? Oh yeah, I should show you my pin cushion. Check out the pin cushion. This is courtesy of my sister. She made it. It's a teeny tiny teacup. The little pin cushion in it. Okay, we have pins all the way around. So now from the pillow side, and I'm just going to stop and think this through before I put it on wrong. I have the right side of my quilted pillow to the right side of the backing, and I'm just going to baste them together. This is not going to get turned. It's just going to be basted to hold them in place. So I'll go ahead and put a longer basting stitch on my machine because it will go much faster if I do that. I just think I want to take my little leader ender off. Come on, cut. See, it's always something, I swear, when I do these live episodes. Today, my cutter's not cutting, and I'm sure it's me. But there we have it. So this, particularly where I've trimmed those corners in that slightly rounded shape, this is what I'm kind of, what's the word I want? I want to get the two edges together so that my backing has that same slightly rounded shape too, right? And rather than measure them both, I'm just going to do this basting and then trim my backing so that it matches. And then easy peasy, they're both exactly the same shape. And I'm trying to make a basting stitch on here. What am I doing wrong? Mr. Producer is asking if I can lower the light. Let me see if I can. Do. Does that make it easier to see? I can turn it off. Is that easier? Okay. So we've got the sewing machine light off. It's interesting how these things read very differently on camera than they do on, you know, in real life. I'm still trying to get a basting stitch. That's what I was trying to do. I'm calling it good. Here we go. And it's good I put my pins in there because my quilting is wanting to kind of push under my presser foot. So I'm going to use my seam ripper to nudge it under the needle a little bit faster. I'm also doing this stitching well within what will be my basting line. So under 1/4 of an inch. Not my basting line, my binding line. And I'm just popping the pins out as I go. So I'm going to pause when I get to this corner. It's even worse trying to talk and sew at the sewing machine because I'm not as comfortable doing this. And so, did we get a cut? We did. And so I did not get my seam, I didn't get that overlap caught underneath the way that I should have. So I'm going back and just undoing that a little bit. I need to put a couple more pins in there and then pay attention as I'm sewing across it, and it would have worked just fine. So meantime, like I said, you're welcome to type in any questions or comments or even tips.
Yes, so they're coming, so you might want to read comments soon.
Mr. Producer is saying, yep, they're coming. I might want to read comments soon. I should make a comment too about the thread I'm using. You may or may not have seen while I'm sewing. I've actually got kind of a purpley pink loaded in my needle thread. And I only did that because that's what I'm going to use to top stitch on that little piping edge. And to me, it doesn't really matter what colors are like inside. So I just went ahead and loaded it that way right from the outset. Okay, Mr. Producer says I should read some questions. Let's do it. Let's get some coffee. Okay, I think you're sewing right sides together. Diane, it's really good I have you here to look out for me. See, I even stopped. This seems to me...
Hold on, we're going to keep all these people. We're going to keep reading comments.
Mr. Producer's just laughing hysterically. Laughing hysterically. Oh, you guys are great.
Can't wait to see how you're going to find it.
Well, let's just chat for a while I undo some stitching. I tell you what, I've had more servings of humble pie live and on camera lately than you can shake a stick at. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being real. I'm laughing because this is the name of the podcast, right? Measure twice, cut once. And, think about it twice and sew it once. Yeah. Well, it'll only take a minute to undo it. By the way, you guys, I should show you my method for undoing. I don't know if I can get the angle right, though. Let's get past this area where I sewed twice. First off, this has been a conversation at the long arm the last couple times I've been at it. How do you undo so quickly? So you're seeing it with my seam ripper now. I've got the little knobby end underneath, like the lower part of the sewing, and the hook end at the top. And I've got it between my layers of fabric that I'm undoing. And if I can keep those layers fairly flat, I'm able to just slide my seam ripper. And it doesn't work infallibly, but when it goes smoothly, it sure speeds things up. So hang on a sec. Got to have it in front of me while I get it going. And today's not going to be the day that it works smoothly. Of course it's not. Of course it's not.
Can we put some music on?
Let's have some music, okay? Because this is a bit like watching paint dry.
Let's go for Dan because we have to put some.
Yeah. So just to experiment, I flipped my seam ripper so that I had the pointy part down, and that seems to be working better, honestly, and I don't really know why. But you can see I'm not having to undo it one stitch at a time at least, so that is speeding things up. I'm so glad I have you all here to keep me on the straight and narrow. I'm waiting for one of you to start doing a live and unscripted, because you might do a better job. I'm just going back and pulling off my purple threads. Yeah. I'm glad I wasn't all the way around. Could have been worse. We'll have to do our pinning again too afterwards. I'm glad you all have such a good sense of humor. I do feel like, though, I'm about due for an episode that just goes as smooth as cream, don't you think? There we go. All right. Let's do a brush and get some of those purple threads off of there. Okay, let's take a couple comments while I try and clean this up a little bit. What fabric did you use on the quilt behind you? Well, that's an easy question to answer. It is by Vanessa Christensen, and it's an ombre, and it was Bloom. So her ombre lines have a number of different prints. There's confetti and there's pixie dust, I think, but this was Bloom. It has little tiny flowers in it. That's what I used. Okay, let's take all the pins out and let's try this project again. Sue, what foot are you using? I like 8D with thickness. I've got the 10 on it, which is just kind of an all-purpose foot. And it may be that there are better choices. Again, that is something I really haven't experimented with. Okay. Kara, what kind of iron is that? Love the red, my favorite color. It's a Laura Star, so it's not just an iron, it's a whole steaming system. Which camera am I on, hun? That one. Gotta turn it on again. It's heating up again. Sadly, it turns off, and I don't know that there's a switch that I can keep that on, so it takes a moment to heat. But what it does is produces ultra fine steam that doesn't feel wet. And so it eliminates the need to press and then put a clapper on to make something flat. It just presses it with steam, and it is beautiful. So by making the back the same as the front, does that leave enough room for the loft of the pillow form? It does. Both of them are larger than the pillow. So there's going to be enough room in there for the pillow form, yes. Okay, let me think this through. So now we've got the right side of the cushion And we're going to put the pillow down just as though we were making it like the finished product. So we've got the right side facing out, or downwards in this case. Really, I'm so glad I have you guys here to keep track of me. What would I do? What would I do if I was left to my own devices? And I don't think you have to even center the pillow over that envelope area, but I feel like the center is about the easiest to be able to then pull it open and get the pillow inside, the pillow form inside. Okay, you guys chime in. Have I got it right this time? I'll pin it and I'll wait for your comments. Okay, I'm listening. Yeah. Mr. Producer is saying there's more comments and I'm nodding. Madge, Susan, your Bernina foot has a walking stitch capability. You engage it on the back of the foot and it really makes sewing over thick fabric and batting easier. Okay, I will look into that. I don't know if I can get at it today, but I'll have a quick peek. I'm serious. One of you guys needs to do some live shows with sewing machines so I can learn. Shannon, if you use the dual feed, it will help with all the layers. It's like using a walking foot. So is that the same thing Madge is talking about, that I can just turn on at the back of the foot? We'll have a peek in a minute. Giselle, I feel for you. Talking and doing at the same time don't always work out as planned. Isn't that the truth? Like, my tongue just gets tangled sometimes. Karen, glad you're keeping it real. We've all been there, just not live on camera. I know. I often say that. I'm the only person silly enough to actually get on camera and do it. Amy, dancing helps me. You're funny, girl. Okay, let's see if we can figure out how to turn the dual feed on. Let's get out our manual. Hey, how's that for an idea? Dual feed. Let's see if that tells us anything. There's not much of a table of contents in this, let me tell you. Okay, there's one more comment apparently. Oh, there you go. This is Dave. Those of you who put a Q before your question get a gold star. I don't know that I'm going to be able to find quickly the dual feed for the presser foot. Removing and replacing the presser foot. So Madge and Shannon are talking about the same thing. If you have more details on how I can do that, I'm happy to try it. But I'm not going to waste your time looking in the manual. The funny thing is, I don't think I have a foot on it that has a dual feed. And again, I'm not going to change that on the fly. Here's a funny thing. I have grown up my whole life stitching on, well, I learned on a treadle sewing machine. And then I have a 301 Singer and a featherweight. And so these are machines that have 0 options, right? So fancy sewing machines are new to me. Very new. Okay, let's try this again. Some of you are asking if this is a new machine, and it is. I've only had it, I don't know, not even 6 months. And the thing is, I just don't sew a ton these days. So maybe I need to sew some more quilts or clothes for the grandbabies. Who knows? Okay, I think we've got everything oriented correctly now, thank goodness. And it's actually doing pretty good. You know, because I've always worked with machines that don't have dual feed, for example, I'm used to, you know, holding my fabric front and back, for example, and putting a tiny bit of tension on it to keep it flat, and it seems to be doing just fine. So. My seam ripper, honestly, is one of my favorite tools of the sewing machine. You can see how I'm using it to just encourage the fabric to go under the presser foot and not push out in front of it. That's always been my go-to way. And again, I'm just keeping my stitching very slim, quite a bit under 1/4 inch, just to hold the layers in place. See, if we edited these, I could just edit out that faux pas entirely. I could just clean that right out. But that wouldn't be our way, would it? Make sure all my layers are catching this time. I do learn. So for any who might just be tuning in, I call these episodes live and unscripted because they are unedited and they're streamed in real time. So, as many of you have seen already, the oopses and the mistakes are all included. You get to learn from my mistakes without having to make your own. And usually they are making an entire project, and often they are quilting at the long arm for an entire quilt and showing you the whole process from beginning to end. But today I'm completing a pillow that I quilted a few weeks back. The episode was called Straight Line Quilting with a Twist. So I was quilting this, it was a single block, a large block. It's a Lori Holt pattern from one of her vintage Christmas books. And I'm using the block plus a pillow form to make a new cushion for my couch. So at this point I am just basting the layers together in exactly the orientation I want them to be on the finished pillow. So you saw how strong that urge is to do right sides together. So now I am wrong sides together, right sides facing out, and that's what we want. Almost there. Okay, that's done. So now I'm going to take my rotary cutter and my ruler and just trim that backing up to match the front. And again, make absolutely sure, I know you can't see this super well, but this is not rocket science here. But just to make sure that there's less than 1/4 inch of seam allowance outside of my basting line so that it will all get caught in the binding. So if you're enjoying this, the reality of it, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and subscribe to the channel. And if you will click the bell, you will even get notifications of when I'm going live. And our lives are not as regular, it seems like, as they once were, but we do still do them on Friday mornings. So I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. If you want advance notification of what the episode might be about, I try and send out a newsletter on Wednesday or Thursday leading up to a live and unscripted episode so that you can have a photograph and kind of know what it's all about and what topics I'll be talking about. So to do that, just go to my website, stitchedbysusan.com. You'll get a little pop-up there, and by entering your email address, you will get on my newsletter list. So Mr. Producer says a few of you are asking about my quilting machine and what's going on there. The last couple of episodes have been rather fraught with top thread breakage. And so I finally broke down this week and went and had my machine professionally serviced. And the moral of today's story is you probably should ask for professional help sooner than I did. So I'm happy to report that they did find a few things that needed adjustment and tweaking. I'll sit down so you can see me. And by and large, my machine is working much better. There's still, which camera? Here we go. There's still the odd thing or two. I'm still in conversation with my service guy, trying to get it 100%, but it's working much, much, much better. So, you know, he's got tools and calibration and things like that that I don't have at my disposal. So it was wisdom to just take it into him and have him give it a once over. So behaving much, much, much better. I'm greatly relieved. So I do wish I'd gone sooner. Could have saved myself some frustration, but happy news is we're up and quilting again. So that's very, very good. And the coffee. Okay, let's have a couple comments. Lisa, I love that you do your videos in real time rather than triple speed. It shows us how long things really take. I truly enjoy your videos, the teaching ones and the quilt alongs. Great. Thank you for that, Lisa. A faux pas is a teaching moment, not to worry, even for me. Quiltgram, Dave, the two of you make such an amazing pair. You're right. It's amusing, you know, the old adage that opposites attract. Dave and I are very different, but we bring very different skill sets and even approaches into my quilting business. So it does work well. Sue Donnelly, tell her Bernina Jeff can help. So Bernina Jeff, is that someone on YouTube, a specific person? Not sure, but maybe you'll follow up on that, Sue. I predict, this is Dave, some sewing episodes in the future where Susan plays with the feet of her new machine. See, that could be a really fun episode. That could be fun. Judy, happy to know that Stella wasn't haunting you. Yeah, no. Oh, do you mean Lucy haunting me, the old machine? Yeah, so true. Yes. No. And honestly, I knew this. They're mechanical machines, right? There is something at the bottom of these issues. And the mistake I made was just in waiting too long and banging my head against that wall too long of trying to figure it out myself. And I just needed to ask for help. So, all right. I think we're ready to get going. We now have, and let's double check. We now have basically a pillow. Here's our car. Here's our backing with our opening, right? So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to get my pillow form and we're going to check it. I suspect that it's going to be a little loose. I like a very plump pillow, and I don't know that it's going to be that, but I didn't want to trim the car either. So it is what it is. But it's a pillow form I had on hand, and I like to use what I have on hand. So let's just see how it looks. Oh, I think it's going to be fine. I'm not going to stuff it all the way in because that'll be hard to get back out. But I think that's going to be fine, right? That's going to be great. Too fun. So someone suggested, the day that I was quilting the front, suggested that I quilted the backing too. And I didn't get that done. I now kind of wish I had, because if you look carefully at this pillow form, you can see there's feathers coming through. And I think actually quilting both front and back would have helped to alleviate some of that. But what's done is done. I'm not doing it now. Okay, let's get to binding. Here's our trusty binding. And in case you missed it earlier, I'm going to quickly run through it again. I've made a binding that has a faux piping. And what I mean by faux is there's not actually any piping. It's just my binding sewn in two parts. Can you see the seams? So I cut my dark 1 3/8 inches and my wide 1 5/8 inches, my pink, meaning that the pink is then 1/4 inch wider. So then when I fold the thing in half, the pink goes to the middle and wraps around 1/8 of an inch to the front. So now I'm going to sew it on the way I typically would a machine binding. I'm going to sew it on the back of the pillow, roll it around, and top stitch right in the ditch of that little piping on the front side. And it's going to make a very sharp look. So I'm going to start somewhere in the middle of the pillow so that that splice will not be at a corner. Let me make sure we get this the right way. I need the other end of the piping. This I have learned by experience too. Double check that you're getting your binding on right way around. So if I sew it... Oh, someone is suggesting wrapping batting around the pillow. Oh, that's not a bad idea. To fluff it up a little bit and fill in those corners. Yeah. Okay, so if I sew my binding on this way, we're just double checking, right? And we fold it, and then it goes round to the front, and we get that pink edge at the front. Yep, that's what we want. See, I do learn. Double check these things. I'm also avoiding this area where I've got the overlap of that envelope, just because I'm going to avoid having my connecting seam there if I possibly can. So the width of your binding, the width of your seam that you're sewing, the one that I'm going to sew now, that all is up to you. If you do wider bindings or narrower bindings, you might have to adjust those things accordingly. I typically do a 2 1/4 inch binding. I actually made it 2 1/2 for this one. It was easier to do the math of that little faux piping. So the seam I'm sewing now is a generous 1/4 inch. And again, I'm going to sew a little ways, and I'm going to reach back behind and flip it around and make sure that that measurement works out well too, that everything is fitting into place the way I want it to. like right now. So if I fold it all the way around, does it top stitch in the right place? I feel like I could be making a slimmer seam. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to narrow it down by about 1/16 of an inch. And I might have to undo that very early part when I come back around. I don't like it to be, I like it to be full, so the binding is full of the quilt, but I don't like it to be so tight that I have to manhandle it. It makes it really difficult to sew it crisp and top stitch it neatly. So exactly the way that you would bind a quilt. You sew to, your corner, whatever your seam allowance is, you sew that far from the corner and miter your edge just like you would to bind a quilt. And I won't go into all of that today. I'm going to assume you know how to do that. Yep, let's just take off that little early bit when we come back around. I think I'll have plenty of binding, so I may even be able to just snip that off in my excess. See how quickly that works? When your seam ripper just rests in there against your threads, it is super, super quick to undo. Ask me why I know this. Someone is asking where they can find directions for this kind of binding. Do you mean the faux piping binding or just for machine binding a quilt? Faux piping. I wouldn't be surprised someone's got it on YouTube. I don't personally have an episode. And so now you're making me think, because that is one I could do, but I have not done so far. But it is most commonly called faux piping. So I think if you searched for that, you may find one. And again, you can see that I'm using my seam ripper just to encourage that binding to feed under the presser foot equally too. And again, if I knew how to do the dual feed, it would serve the same purpose. But the idea being that both layers of my binding feed under the presser foot equally fast and that my top one does not push out in front. I do have a YouTube episode on machine binding a quilt. And there's some great tips on there for keeping your binding neat and square and getting these super trim mitered corners. I do most of my bindings at the machine, so I've kind of made a science of how to get it super, super neat and crisp. That was corner number 3. Another thing that I do when I bind, almost without thinking about it, is I put a little bit of tension on this portion of the binding. Not a lot, but if I don't put any, I run into more trouble with it bubbling in front of my presser foot, and I also run into having wavy edges on my binding on my finished quilt. So I just do that without thinking about it, honestly. I put a little tension on this, just a little bit right here, as I'm laying it down, hold it in place, and stitch it. And that seems to work really well for producing a very flat binding. You guys, we're going to be down to a whisker with the amount of binding that I made. But I think it's enough. Okay, apparently there's a funny comment coming. Oh boy, after Susan gets a class on how to drive her new Porsche, she's going to love it. She's driving like an automatic 20-year-old Chevy. Okay, you're hysterical. Okay, Sue Donnelly, you have been elected. You are to give me a class on how to drive. Seriously, you have been elected. Come on over and let's do this. So as you can see, I do not have a lot of binding left. So I'm going back in this early part that I stitched with a more generous seam allowance. I'm going back and stitching with a fine one. And then I'm going to give myself just enough room to join my two ends. I really want more elucidation, Sue. I want to know what it is I'm doing that's like a 20-year-old Chevy. Other than, you know, my manhandling of the fabric, which is just what I'm used to doing, as you say, with an old manual stick shift, because that's about the speed of it. Okay, back to the corner again. So I'm going to go ahead and miter this corner and then just get the sewing begun, and then I'm going to pause it and join my two ends. Just like that. And again, if you want more details on how I join these ends, that is all in my machine binding episode. I won't talk at length about it today. I'll just get the job done. Is Sue giving me some schooling elements? Okay, Dave, I'll pick her up in KC and drive her to the farm in the middle of Missouri. She can teach me couching on the long arm, and I'll give her 5 stick shift lessons. I am all over that, Sue. So funny. I mean, I fully acknowledge that I am not an expert on a great many things. Long arming is my shtick. But I also promised that I would show you guys the finishing of this pillow, so I'm doing that. This is very, very short. Usually I leave a longer area unstitched to handle this, but I don't have that option today. So that's why I pinned, though. That'll keep things square and neat, and we'll get her done. So my aim here is to create a 45-degree angled seam joining my beginning and my ending of my binding. So much like when I sewed my binding pieces together. Come on. I know, Sue, that looked like a stick shift. But much like when I sewed my binding pieces together and I had this angled join, it makes a much less bulky seam. So I've created the same thing now when I'm joining my beginning and ending. So I pull it open to make sure that it's all laying in the right direction. And after that, I go and trim out those excess bits, finger press that seam open, and then we're ready to finish off the sewing. I don't have an actual pair of scissors here, of course, by my sewing machine, so we're doing this with the little bee clippers. Needs must. So by finger pressing, I just mean I open that seam and run along it basically with my thumbnail. You certainly could take it to your ironing board, but you don't need to. Pull it into place. Looks good. Sue, you've made me self-conscious about my sewing a little bit now. I just undid a little because I've got a bit of easing to do, and I'm just going to spread it over a longer distance is all I'm doing there. I undid about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches. My cutter is working now. It just didn't work that first time. So one feature I want to know, and if one of you can tell me how to do this via my YouTube channel, I'd be thrilled. The one feature I really want to know is how you make the presser foot just rise a little bit so that you can pivot, or so that you can feed, you know, mass production pieces under there. I'm positive this machine does that, but I can't figure out how to make it do it. Okay, looky, we have binding. It's very pink. So the next step for me, and I do this on quilts as well. There we go, over the ironing board. I always iron my binding open like this. It's much easier to top stitch it on the front when that has been pressed in place. Try it for yourself. I think you'll agree. And I bet you my iron is off again. I should have reached back here and turned it on sooner. So it's really simple. It's not fussy. I just press it away from the quilt. And I do that all the way around. Okay, Judy, you're driving that machine like I drove my daughter's sports car last Friday night. Once I got where I was going, I refused to drive it home. Oh my goodness, you guys, way to make a girl feel good about herself. I am all for driving lessons. I'll take them. The hover technique on the computer screen. Okay, I'll look for that after we're off air. How's that? Okay, next time we sew, excuse me. Next time we sew, I'm going to get out my treadle because I know how to run that stick shift and make you guys watch me sew on that. My model is a B770 Quilters Edition Plus. And I mean, I'm joking a whole bunch, but I'm actually fairly serious. If one of you wanted to get on a Zoom conversation with me and help me out, I would be appreciative. Okay, I'm just picking off my little purple threads from all that undoing. Bear with me a sec while I do that because they're really showing. It's looking pretty good. Okay, I think we're ready. So now all that we're going to do is turn this all the way around and top stitch in the ditch of that little faux piping. So it's pretty simple. And I know there's a foot that would do this, but I don't know which one it is. Nevertheless, at the end of today, I will have a finished pillow, rain or shine. So I'm content. My dad used to say, if you can drive a standard, you can drive anything. So I'm sticking to it. It may not be pretty, but I will have a finished pillow. Again, I use that seam ripper tool to hold it in place. Sometimes if I just hold this with my fingers, I'll get a swoop where each finger is. So if I use the point of my seam ripper, or if you have a stylus, that would do the same thing too. You can let that slide quite a ways under that hopper foot. I call it a hopper foot, and it's not that. It's a presser foot on the sewing machine to help keep it perfectly in place. And again, why I'm giving you guys these tips when I'm sure there's a foot that does this automatically that you can line right up in that ditch. But it's my pillow, and I'm doing it the hard way. Adria, I have lots to learn about my 475. We'll get there. You know, we will, Adria. And meantime, we'll have fun in the process. I can take it if you guys laugh at me. Really, I can. I should have been pinning this before I got that close. still sewed my seam a little bit too generously. This would have been easier to do if I had a little more piping to work with. But it will definitely be a full and a plump piping, that is for sure. Just debating if I want to break the thread. I don't think so. Can you see how nice that's looking? So whoever suggested this piping, thank you for that idea. It was a great one. I felt like the pinky purpley piping as a whole was a little bit much. The dark framed it better. I'm going to do one thing that another quilter taught me, and that is to go in the corners and take a kind of angled snip at some of those layers. You don't want to take them all out because you want a full corner, but the corner is almost too full, I'm finding on this. I'm not even able to get a decent mitered edge because there's so much thickness there. So I'm just taking a very small, like 1/8 of an inch, angled cut on that corner. Okay, someone's giving me hover setting instructions. Let's hear it. Oh, Dave's got it on his iPad. Yeah, no, sorry, hon. I'll do it after the class. So usually, when I'm about 2 inches from the corner is when I go in and pin before the miter and pin after the miter, and then go ahead and just top stitch around that corner. And yes, I did just stitch over pins. I don't know, I'm curious what you guys think about that. I know most sewists will strongly recommend don't stitch over your pins, but I do use very fine pins, and I do stitch over them slowly and carefully. I have not ever, ever, ever broken a pin or a needle. Maybe you've got horror stories to tell that will make me change my mind. But at this point, I don't know how you would get around those corners without having pins there to keep things anchored. So once again, if you're enjoying this episode and poking fun at Susan, you should like and subscribe to the channel. There'll be more opportunities, I'm sure, in future to poke fun at me. And hopefully there will also be some fun quilting sessions as well. I'm hoping to be on air again next Friday, which would be the first Friday of June, with a quilting project. That is not 100% sure. So as I mentioned earlier, best way to know for sure is to be in my newsletter email list. And I do endeavor to, on Wednesday or Thursday in advance of these Friday sessions, send out a picture of what I'll be working on and some of the topics that I'll be talking about. But I do hope to be on air next Friday, quilting again. approaching corner number 4. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Clearly, you might want to ask them of other, viewers and not of me, because I don't really, apparently I don't really know my machine, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the pillow. I'll mention again, the pattern for this block is by Holt. It's in one of her vintage Christmas books, and it is a whole quilt in that book. There's a pine tree on top of the car and multiple cars in the quilt, but I chose to just do the one block and leave the trees off. So it's not quite as Christmassy. And it's the perfect size, I think, for a couch cushion. And then I happen to have this form on hand from a older, outdated pillow, and so that worked perfectly to go ahead and create a cushion. So I simply quilted the front of it, and that episode was called Quilting Straight Lines, Straight Line Quilting with a Twist, and that was a couple of weeks ago on YouTube when I was quilting this pillow top. And then the backing is just an envelope style, so 2 pieces of fabric that are hemmed and kind of overlap, so I can slide the pillow in. And I'm not putting any closures on it other than the overlap of those 2 pieces. Okay. Well, you guys, you've had good chuckles at my expense, which is absolutely lovely, but I tell you what, look at this. We have a cushion. This camera? There we go. And do you see how earlier it almost looked like it was pulling up a little tighter, but it's actually laying fairly nice and flat, and you don't see the slight bits that I cut off the corners. They still look very square, but they're just ever so slightly relaxed, and I prefer that look as opposed to one that looks like it's being pulled out. So I'm really pleased with that. Okay, why don't we read the epistle that Mr. Producer says that someone sent while I stuff the pillow in the cushion. Okay, I'm ready to read. Nancy, I have a 750 and love it. I always use my knee lift. Once you get used to using your knee lift for your presser foot, won't be able to sew without it. Raise or lower the presser foot whenever you feel like it and never have to take your hands off the garment. I also have a Bernina Q24 and watch your videos. It'll come back. Just learning how to quilt. I've been piecing for a few years. I'm so glad I spent the extra money and got the computer now to learn how. I'm not so good at it, the free motion I mean. I may not be so good at the computer, but I'm going to try. And at 77 years old. Good for you. Good for you. I need a break, but I keep trying. Love, love, love Bernina machines. I started out many years ago with the 950 and have had every single Bernina up to date. Wow. Oh, so a machine that did not work well, took it back and traded it for the 750 and have never looked back. Enjoy your shows so much. Keep on keeping on. You know I will. And honestly, these very impromptu shows makes it feel a little more realistic, makes it feel a little more like we're sewing in a room together, because these things would be happening if we were sewing in a room together, and we'd be laughing at each other just the same, wouldn't we be? You guys, we have a pillow. So someone's idea earlier on was to wrap an extra layer of batting around that cushion inside. I think I will do that because there is a bit of looseness, especially at the corners, and I don't love that feel. So I have some wool batting scraps, so I'm going to wrap that pillow a time or two and maybe just machine tack that in place so it stays in there and doesn't shift about. And that will also serve the purpose of keeping some of those errant feathers from migrating through, especially in this backing because there's only one layer of fabric here. Betsy is asking, do you see the ditching line on the back? You do, Betsy. And in an ideal world, what would have happened is I would have measured my seam allowances a little better. Usually my binding overlaps a little further so that my top stitching is within the backing, not on the binding on the back. And so what I've done is matched my bobbin thread to my backing, so that would not show very much at all. But this time I made my seam just a little too generous, so my top stitching ends up falling on the binding, right? And so that's something that you could think through. If you're doing that faux piping, for example, you're not top stitching it right at the edge, you're top stitching it 1/8 of an inch in, right? So I should have had a bigger wrap around on the front, and that would have helped that bobbin thread stitching to only show on this part, and it would have looked much less unobtrusive. I may, because I do love a nice looking product, I may actually go back and restitch that. It would be relatively easy to do, to restitch the binding, and I may, just so that I get that really precise look at the end. There was a question, hun, and I missed it. Betsy, did you use your channel locks to quilt the top? Yes, I did do that. Makes it ever so much easier. Northern Sue, definitely not poking fun, but feeling so reassured that this stuff happens for you too. Of course it does. And you know too, if you go to quilting retreats or sew at your friend's house or whatever, this sort of stuff happens and the girls end up laughing hysterically together. If you were in the room, that's what we'd be doing. I'm okay with that. Cindy, the non-pinners would glue the corners. I did think of that, Cindy, actually, when I was saying, how else would you keep those corners in place? Lauren, use a drop of glue to hold the corners. So I don't know if you've done that. I haven't for binding, but I'm going to try it. My friend Sue Hines is a great believer in Elmer's white glue because it's not actually a glue. It's like it's an adhesive, but it washes out completely. And so you can use that in place of pins at any time. So you could put a drop of glue on there. You have to iron it. You have to heat set it to hold it in place or dry it. And then you can proceed to top stitch. So that would be a great approach to that and not have pins in it. Absolutely. And I'm sure, again, Sue Donnelly and others who know this machine, the Porsches, would say that if you used a foot, for example, that had, it has an edging that butts up against the edge of that binding, you could keep your top stitching perfectly straight and perfectly even. All those things. I'm sure there are better ways to do it. But that's the way I've always done it on my very plain Jane machine. So that's how I did it today. Anyway, that's our pillow. Thanks you guys for tuning in so much. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, would you hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel? I always appreciate those. Share this channel with your quilty friends that you think might enjoy these projects as well. I hope to be back next week with a quilting project again. Watch on my newsletter and on my social media pages for information about that. So thanks so much for joining me. It's been great fun sewing a pillow with you.